Dollar. Dirt and money, no soul. Had to go and get it, ain't no time to kick it. Got a stack and flip for my foes. Dollar. Please tell me you can hear me. Don't turn your back and don't neglect me. Just let me know if you need me. Dollar. Let me watch out for my partners. Keep my money long, get my team strong. Let me run away from my problems.
Yo, what's good, original crew, man? We back. We got Mr. Ballen with What Would You Do? What would you do? For? Y'all suck. Y'all suck.
Who was y'all?
Those who don't know that jingle, what would you do?
We all know it. The
Finish
ice cream. I know it.
She had to think.
No, I didn't.
She was in full trying to. But what would you do in Rattlesnake Canyon? Let's find out what we possibly could do. Hey, because sometimes you never know what you'll do until you put it in a situation.
What you said.
So with that being said, make sure y'all check out the links in the description box.
Down below.
You already know where to go, man. You want the first part, you got to do it. Check out down below. Also, if you enjoyed today's video,
Look at it with a thumbs up.
we'll highly appreciate it, man. But let's go. Let's check it out. Let's see what's about. You ready?
I'm ready.
All right, let's roll it.
Sometimes, everyday people are forced to make truly unthinkable decisions. Take, for example, somebody who goes to work like normal, and then a fire breaks out in their office, they can't get rescued, and suddenly this person is deciding whether they want to burn to death or jump out the window to their death. Now, when we hear about these totally tragic stories, we all wonder the same thing. What would we do in that situation? Well, I want you to keep that question in the back of your mind as you listen to today's story, because it's about these two people who find themselves in a totally hopeless situation. And so as it unfolds, ask yourself, what would you do? But before we get into that story, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you've come to the right place, because that's all we do, and we upload once a week. So if that's of interest to you, after the like button has gone to bed...
You good?
Yeah.
You over here doing too much fidgeting.
I was like, you didn't do your little thing with him.
Oh.
and we upload once a week. So, if that's of interest to you, after the like button has gone to bed for the night, secretly sneak into their room and slightly unplug their phone charger from their phone so it looks like it's plugged in, but it's not charging. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. Okay, let's get into today's story. At about 1:30 in the afternoon on August 8th, 1999, a park ranger named Lance Matson stood frowning down at a dusty red Mazda car inside of an otherwise empty parking lot just outside of Carlsbad Caverns National Park in New Mexico. Lance knew the two men who owned this red Mazda had taken out a one-night permit to be allowed to go into Rattlesnake Canyon, which is one of the most isolated parts of this national park. It's basically just a single long, scrubby little trail that's kind of all desert with high canyon walls on either side. In order to get access to Rattlesnake Canyon, people need to go to the visitor center and literally fill out paperwork so the park rangers know they're out there and can go out and check on them if they don't come back in time. And so the two men who owned the Mazda had done that. They had filled out all the paperwork. But now Lance was noticing they had not returned at the end of their permit. They had stayed out, presumably in Rattlesnake Canyon, for an additional 3 nights. Now, Lance was not concerned because people did do this. It was more like he was annoyed because now he would have to go out into Rattlesnake Canyon and find these two guys and figure out.
So they didn't stay additional 3 nights.
Yeah.
Additional 3 past what they... Nigga, after the first night, you go check. Because 3 nights...
Well, I guess since it's so common, it's like not this alarming thing, but at the same time,
3 nights, if they in desperate need, that can be...
I get you.
Already red flags.
What's going on? So Lance and the park volunteer that he was with began walking on the trail in the direction of Rattlesnake Canyon. And after walking less than a mile on this trail, Lance and this volunteer looked up ahead, and just off the trail, there was a green and maroon tent that was pitched right out in the open. And so Lance immediately assumed that this had to be the two men who owned the red Mazda. And so very quickly, Lance's annoyance was replaced with relief, because it turned out it was really easy to find these two campers, and he'd be able to go figure out what was going on and either get them back to their car and get them to leave, or if they wanted to, they could, in theory, extend and stay longer with the right permitting. But when Lance and his partner walked down the trail and left the trail to go walk over to this tent, they started to notice there was something off about it. Right away, as they got closer and closer to this tent, they began to smell this horrible kind of chemical burning smell. And then also all over the ground were all these little bits of burned pieces of trash. And then finally, when Lance and his partner actually arrived right in front of the tent, and they were looking down at the closed flap, it was zipped shut, they saw clearly there was something moving around inside of the tent. But whoever or whatever it was wasn't making any noise. And so Lance and his partner, they kind of looked at each other, and they both at this point were pretty nervous. You know, their hearts are racing. They don't know what's going on here. And then Lance just kind of impulsively reached down, unzipped the tent, and lifted it open. And when he saw what was inside, he immediately was hit with this wave of fear and anxiety. 3 days earlier, on August 5th, 1999, a 26-year-old man named David Coughlin woke up in a sleeping bag inside of his green and maroon tent in Rattlesnake Canyon. And as soon as David sat up, he smiled because he could hear right outside of his tent the sound of his best friend, Raffi Kodakian, making breakfast and gathering up supplies for that morning's hike. Dave and Raffi were on what they called a trip of a lifetime. 6 days earlier, they had left their hometown of Boston, Massachusetts, and traveled more than 2,000 miles west, sleeping at campsites and cheap motels along the way. Their final destination was a university in Santa Barbara, California, where Dave was going to be getting his master's in environmental engineering, but they were going to basically turn the journey out to California into a big vacation. And Carlsbad Caverns National Park was easily both of the men's favorite spots so far, because unlike the other campgrounds they had stayed at so far, which were kind of cheap and small, Carlsbad Caverns was huge. It was 47,000 acres of just wild desert. And so for Dave and Raffi, whose normal everyday lives were kind of safe and boring, doing desk jobs and the like, this felt sort of thrilling, like they were cowboys exploring the Wild West. As Dave sat inside of his tent, listening to Raffi make breakfast and get ready, Dave noticed he was already sweating, despite it being pretty early in the morning. It was just already so hot outside. And so Dave grabbed his water and took a sip, and as he did, he thought about that park ranger who had helped them fill out their paperwork to be allowed to come out into Rattlesnake Canyon, who had made a really big deal about ensuring that Dave and Raffi each have at least 1 gallon of water per person per day that they were going to be out here because of the heat. But after they had left the park ranger, Raffi, who had way more experience camping than Dave did, explained to Dave that that was totally overkill and they didn't need that much water. So instead of bringing 2 huge gallons of water for the single night they planned to be out in Rattlesnake Canyon, Raffi had brought along for both of them just 3 16-ounce bottles of water. For reference, that's approximately 6 times less than what the park ranger had suggested. The men had already used one of those 16-ounce bottles of water to boil hot dogs the night before for their dinner, and now the bottle that Dave was drinking from was already half empty, and so he was pretty much down to the last of his water. But Dave wasn't really worried about his water because he and Raffi were going to be hiking out of Rattlesnake Canyon that day and heading back to their car and continuing their journey out to California. And they knew they had set up their tent very close to the parking lot. And so it was a short hike, they're back in their car, and then they're good. And so Dave capped his water, he got out of his sleeping bag, he left the tent, and he joined Raffi in prepping their supplies to get ready for their hike out. And by 8:30 a.m., their entire site was packed up, and the 2 men were on their way heading back. The 2 men walked at a leisurely pace in the direction towards their vehicle for about an hour, and as they walked, they did see signs that they were on the right trail. There were these stacks of white rocks that marked the trail. But after walking this full hour, they knew they probably should have been at the parking lot, but they didn't see it yet. However, the 2 men were not worried yet because remember, they know they're close, and so they're thinking, okay, maybe a couple more minutes and we'll see the parking lot. And so they stopped, they had some more water, and then they kept on walking. But after walking for another 2-3 hours, still in the direction that they believe was towards the parking lot, they did not see the parking lot. In fact, they didn't see anything that looked familiar, and there were no more stacks of white rocks to show they were even on a trail. They were...
The park ranger, it ain't seem like it took them that long to find them. Right?
All right.
But the sleeping bag, it ain't taking them that long, so how to... I don't know, man. And another thing, because I'm already guessing and assuming what happened, because of everything, eventually somebody passes and somebody has to consume the other. You're out of water, you're out of food. The best way to keep hydrating yourself, possibly if you have no water supply, is possibly drink your own urine.
Yeah.
Then once somebody passes, you don't have to consume. I don't never want to be put in a predicament like that.
True. I don't either.
Really lost. And so Dave and Raffi, who were doing their best not to panic, they both sat down, they pulled off their packs, and they pulled out their topographical map and began looking for some sign of where they were. But neither man could read the topographical map, and so all the swirls on the map showing every contour of every geographical feature, it just didn't make any sense to them, and so the map was of no use, and it was getting hotter and hotter by the minute. And so Dave and Raffi put the map away, feeling totally frustrated, and for a second they thought about getting up and just continuing to walk roughly in the direction they thought they should go. But as soon as they stood up, they both just felt so exhausted from walking and the heat, which was now, it's noon, so it's really burning down on them. And so the two men just walked over to the edge of a canyon wall where some shrubs were kind of hanging off the wall, providing a little bit of shade. And the two men just plunked down right underneath this shade, and they just sat there in silence. Both men knew they did not have the supplies to stay out in this canyon for much longer. They certainly didn't have enough water, which now really was starting to feel like a huge oversight. But luckily, as they're just sitting there, these huge storm clouds rolled in, and for a very short amount of time, there was this incredible downpour of rain. And so Dave and Raffi began catching the raindrops in their mouths, and they began drinking the water off of rocks and leaves. And it wasn't a lot, but it was enough to kind of boost their spirits. They got a little bit more hydration in, and they were kind of ready to deal with the problem they were facing. After the storm had gone, Dave and Raffi decided that their best move was just to continue walking and try to find this parking lot. But despite this motivation, Dave and Raffi would walk for hours and hours into the night. They would not find the parking lot, and so finally they realized they would have to stop and set up camp for another night. And so Dave and Raffi, who by now were really starting to feel scared, they found this washed out gully and they set up their green and maroon tent, but neither man could sleep. And so they just sat outside of their tent, telling each other that don't worry, the park rangers are bound to have noticed that we did not come back in time. We only had that 1-day permit. We've exceeded the limit. They're bound to come out here and find us. But in the back of both Dave and Raffi's mind, they weren't so sure that was definitely going to happen. They didn't really know how long it would take for park rangers to notice when people stayed too long. But as Dave and Raffi were speaking, they suddenly noticed far off in the distance something that looked like headlights, like on a car, and it was moving across the horizon. And both Dave and Raffi thought, wait a minute, that's got to be a road right there. All we have to do is go to that road and we're saved. We don't need the park rangers to come rescue us. And so suddenly Dave and Raffi were filled with hope, and they forgot about how thirsty and hungry they were. And they just crawled into their beds and they fell asleep almost immediately, because all they wanted to do was get to the next morning where there'd be daylight so they could hike out and get to that road and get back home. Dave and Raffi woke up early the next morning, and they were very eager to get up and start making their way towards this road. But instead of packing up their campsite and bringing it with them, they decided instead to leave their campsite and leave behind a journal that had some information about who they were and what they were doing in case park rangers came looking for them. And so Dave pulled out a journal from his pack, and he drew a kind of crude map of where this campsite was and where they were going towards this road that appeared to be up on this ridge. And then also Dave included in this note, Dave and Raffi's names, their ages, where they lived, some contact info, and also the fact that they were completely out of food and water, and that if you find this journal, please follow up and make sure we're okay. And so, after leaving behind this journal at the campsite, Dave and Raffi set off to go to this road. But after walking for hours and hours up a kind of gradual incline, they reached what appeared to be this kind of third ridge where up and above the ridge was this road. But to get up onto this kind of wall right in front of them was really challenging. There was cactus everywhere, and the gullies that kind of led up to the top of this ridge were very slippery and almost vertical, so nearly impossible to climb. And so this was really a chore getting up there. And you got to remember that Dave and Raffi are already totally exhausted. They have no food, no water, and so this is miserable. But eventually, Dave and Raffi were able to get up onto this ridge, and they looked out, and there was no road. There was nothing. It was just pure desert as far as they could see. And so they had no idea what those lights were that they saw. Clearly, it was not headlights. I mean, for all they knew, it could have been a figment of their imagination. You know, they're desperate to be saved, and so maybe it was possible that they imagined seeing this road. And so as the two men stared in stunned silence at nothingness in front of them, they noticed that a buzzard had actually begun flying in slow circles over their head, almost like it was just waiting for the two men to die so the buzzard could come down and eat them. Now, Dave was ready right then and there to head back to their campsite and just wait, but Raffi was insistent that they just keep on going because you never know, maybe there is a road just a little bit.
At this point, Raffi the fuck up, bro. You the one told us not to bring the water. Like, dude,
And personally, I'm not about to keep going. We ain't even come this way. Like, I'm not even about to.
Like what? Like,
I'm just about to go down.
To
and I'm
be
trying
honest,
to figure out
how y'all didn't navigate nothing? Like, why are y'all out in the wilderness if y'all don't know how to navigate at all to get back?
And I'm also trying to figure out, did y'all not realize how long it took you to get to where you were initially were from the parking lot? Because it doesn't, like you said, it didn't seem like it took the park ranger that long to get to the tent.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So I'm kind of like,
along, but after walking for maybe a couple more hours, they did not see a road, and by this point both men were beyond exhausted, and so the two men did finally turn around and painstakingly walk their way all the way back to their campsite. And as they're walking, they're telling themselves, maybe we'll get there and park rangers will be waiting for us, a search party will be here. But when they got to their campsite, there was absolutely no sign that anybody had come to their campsite since they left. Their journal with their note and their crude map and all that was still just sitting right in the middle of their campsite, untouched. And it was at this point that Dave and Raffi's spirits were just totally broken. The next morning was Saturday, August 7th. So Dave and Raffi were now beginning their fourth day in the desert and their third day without any water. Raffi had gotten really sick from drinking his own urine, and Dave had begun to experience all these horrible stomach cramps, very likely from eating unripe prickly pears. Also, Dave's legs were starting to seize up, which made it nearly impossible to walk. And so the two men knew they had no chance of hiking out of here to safety. They really just had to wait for their rescue to come. And so that day, Dave and Raffi attempted, with the little energy they had, to make a huge SOS symbol on the ground using rocks. But after putting the S down and the O down, they didn't have enough energy to collect more rocks to make the last S. And so they did not finish their SOS symbol. And then also Raffi at some point soaked his sleeping bag in fuel and lit it on fire to try to create a smoke signal that somebody might see. But the smoke didn't get high enough, and so it didn't work. And so all that really accomplished was it destroyed Raffi's sleeping bag and also created this terrible stench around their campsite of burning chemicals from having burned the polyester material that made up the sleeping bag. And so by that afternoon, when the sun was right over their head and beating down on them, Dave and Raffi just crawled inside of their tent and laid there in silence. And as they did, they noticed the stones underneath their tent felt kind of cool, and so they cut the bottom of the tent out and just laid directly on these loose rocks inside of their tent. By that evening, when still no rescuers had arrived, Dave and Raffi really began to realize that this could be the end. And so Dave, he grabbed that notebook where they had drawn that crude map of where the lights and the road had been, and he flipped the page, and then he wrote a note to his girlfriend, basically saying goodbye, because he knew he was probably going to die. And then Raffi, he took the journal, and he did something similar, but also included that, he would not allow the buzzards to get them, that they would at least ensure their bodies were intact for their families to find. And then after writing these notes and tucking the journal away, Dave and Raffi crawled out of the tent, because by now it's dark out, the sun's not out, it's a little bit cooler outside. And the two men, they sat down and they began having a fairly matter-of-fact conversation about the situation they were in. Both men were very emotional. At one point, Dave began screaming and crying just out of despair. But at the end of this conversation, the two men made a decision, an unthinkable one, that really would only ever be made in a situation like this. And so after both men were on the same page, they crawled inside the tent and zipped it up. It was the next morning, August 8th, 1999, when that park ranger and his volunteer that was with him had walked along the trail towards Rattlesnake Canyon and discovered Dave and Raffi's ransacked campsite. And they had walked up and they had seen all the burned materials nearby, which was Raffi's sleeping bag and other bits of trash they had tried to burn. And then they had gone to the front of the tent, and Lance had opened it up, and when he looked inside, he saw Raffi, who was alive. He was laying on his side, and he was only wearing these filthy green shorts, and he just looked totally emaciated and terrible and haggard. I mean, the guy really looked like he was on death's door. And then Raffi, when he saw Lance looking in, he just said, "Please tell me you have some water." And Lance did have some water. He gave it to him. And then Lance, knowing that Raffi was with another person, Dave, he said, "Hey, where is the guy you were with?" And Raffi, as he's drinking the water, just kind of casually pointed out of the tent somewhere off behind where Lance and his partner was. And so Lance and his partner, they turned around and they didn't see anybody. They were just kind of looking off towards the canyon wall, and there was nothing there. And so Lance turned around again and he said, "Are you sure he's over there?" And Raffi, without any expression on his face, just continued to point and said, "Yes, he's right over there." And so Lance, he got up, he turned around, and he began walking towards this canyon wall. But before he got there, he nearly tripped over this arrangement of rocks on the ground. And when he looked down at them, he knew someone clearly had arranged these rocks in a particular way. And so, with a growing sense of dread, Lance reached down and he moved aside one of these rocks. And underneath it, he saw Dave's face. It would turn out, the night before, when Raffi and Dave had crawled outside of their tent and began having that very intense conversation, what they were talking about is, what do? We know we're going to die. No one's going to reach us before we die of starvation, or we die of dehydration, or maybe some animal is going to come attack us and kill us. Like, we don't have any hope. And so as they were sitting there, Dave actually pulled out his pocket knife and attempted to cut his wrists, but he couldn't cut deep enough to actually kill himself. And so Dave said to Raffi, "You're going to have to kill me. And then after that, you're going to have to kill yourself." And Raffi had agreed. And so Raffi and Dave, they went back inside their tent with no floor. It's just open rocks in the bottom. And Dave, he lied down on his back and he pulled his shirt up and he exposed his rib cage. And then Raffi pulled out his 4-inch pocket knife and he placed it right up against Dave's rib cage. And then with Dave basically egging him on to stab him, Raffi attempted to push the knife into his heart, but he couldn't break the skin. And so Dave, he's now screaming out in pain, but he's still urging Raffi to come on, just do it already. And finally,
Hell no.
You know what's so even like
We'll
sad and messed up?
Save it.
Because it was
Save it,
found
save
the
it.
next. Oh, I thought you said
Listen,
save. I thought you said say it.
No, I said save it too. I was saying save it to the end because
Okay,
we
come on,
almost
let's
done.
go. Let's go. Let's go.
My bad.
he's now screaming out in pain, but he's still urging Raffi to come on, just do it already. And finally, Raffi does manage to get the knife right through his ribs and into Dave's heart. Dave did not die right away, but Raffi covered his mouth and continued to push that knife in until he did die. And then once Dave was dead, Raffi used the little bit of energy he had to drag his body away from the tent, where he buried him under those rocks. And then Raffi, who now has no energy left, just crawled back to his tent and laid down on those loose rocks inside of his tent and waited to die. But just a few hours later, on the morning of August 8th, Lance the park ranger, along with his volunteer, had come down and discovered Raffi before he had died. Little did Dave and Raffi know, this campsite where they had been for the past few days was just a 15 or 20 minute walk from their car. 9 months later, on May 11th, 2000, Raffi pled guilty to murder and was sentenced to 16 years in prison. However, Raffi insisted throughout the trial that the reason he killed Dave was because Dave asked him to. It effectively was a mercy killing, and that Raffi intended afterwards to die himself. This was murder-suicide. And Dave's family believed Raffi, and so did another judge. And so ultimately, Raffi would only serve 16 months in prison before he would be released. So that's going to do it. If you got something out of today's episode,
No, that's crazy. That's a crazy one.
Very much so. It's crazy. It's sad. And that's because I kept thinking the entire time, I was like, they mustn't like realize or time the actual hike.
So hold on. So I'll say this before you go there. They had hiked several days before they got to that last place. But by the time they got to the last place, to be honest, they probably was out of it. They didn't even know where they were.
Right, I know. That's why I said the initial place that they.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. That's what I'm saying. The initial hike where y'all had, set your tent up before y'all packed up and was like, we'll go head back to the car. Mm-hmm. I'm saying y'all they didn't realize that they had hiked for a few more than 2 to 3 hours, to set up the initial, where they had, slept at and set up ground or whatever. Because I'm like, y'all were
or even track they hike, like track.
That's what, y'all didn't like time or track or anything because y'all were right there, like right there. And then another thing I'm thinking, I know that y'all didn't have energy, but I just feel like that time, I know y'all was like, okay, this road, but me and the way that I'm set up, I'm not going to do extra stuff that I don't have to, like as far as climbing and trying to figure out. I would have just got up that day and that energy that y'all used to climb up everything, I would have just continued to walk a little bit more, maybe. Like, hopefully, we have to run into it. We know it's this way. Mm-hmm. It seemed like y'all were kind of, somewhat confident to know that it was that way. Yeah. Just continue to walk. Like, me personally, and then after, like, another 2 to 3 hours, I'm like, I know it didn't take us this long to get to the initial. Something's not right. You know what I'm saying? Because it's just so sad because 15 to 20 minutes away from your car, if you just walk a little.
Because y'all spend too long going over here to
That's right.
To where y'all thought the road was. And then, to be honest, y'all was so dehydrated, so like damn near malnutrition. Nutrient. So the fact that y'all was really moving in delusion, like y'all delusional. You know what I'm saying? So like y'all y'all ain't even thinking straight to even like try to look. I'm wondering. My whole thing is, I wonder like how's the land? Is there any like flat land around? Is there any like trying to think of the right word. Like, is it elevated? Is it something where you can like scout out and like have a better visual of the whole area? Besides, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. Because it seems as though like I don't know. It just could have been lack of energy that y'all can
not being able to really think straight and like strategize,
or even see,
or just or that too. And then I'm also like, me personally, if I ever like went hiking with someone and a situation like this occurred, I just cannot make the decision to do that. Like I just can't. Like I'm just gonna have to go out.
Because
I'm not doing it.
Because the sad part is, if y'all just decided to like just wait it out, and if it happens, it happens. Y'all both would have came back. Y'all both would have. And I understand from like the judicial standpoint of it, like that we can't necessarily say because you could have wrote those letters. You could have said, "Hey, let me cover it up." But also finding him in that predicament, I highly doubt you will kill somebody and then there's just, you know what I'm saying, leave yourself out there. And then also you got to look at it like this: if he killed somebody, he wouldn't have like did a memorial. Like you would have buried them and went on, but you wouldn't have kind of memorialized them. You know what I'm saying, by putting the stones there and you kind of trying to, Like it's and then on his end to be blamed for the death and say that it wasn't accidental, but it was more you know how
wasn't like a plan that y'all came up with or whatever the case may be.
You know how effed up that is to be tried and say, oh, you killed your friend, knowing what y'all went through.
And what y'all went through, the discussion and the tough decision that y'all had to make.
And the fact that you're still alive and he's not. You know what I'm saying? You know how much burden that is on somebody? Then they can have survivor's guilt.
Yeah, and I'm wondering how the actual, like, I just wonder, like, how the conversation went, because y'all had agreed to you take me out, or I try to take myself out, but I can't do it, so you take me out, and then, I guess, take yourself out, but did you ever attempt to take yourself out? That's the only question I have, like, or did you was just like, I can't go through with this after doing that? Yeah. It was just like, I can't go through with it. You know, and
that's what I was thinking. I was thinking like maybe he was in the mindset of, I just can't do that. Like, I can't go through that after going through that. I can't. Or honestly, he probably didn't want to kill himself. Because a lot of people was like, hey, I did what you wanted me to do. You wanted me to kill you. I don't want to kill myself.
Well, right. I get that. But if it is, because obviously y'all did agree for, you know, you to take me out and then take yourself out, and it was like this mutual agreement. Yeah. I just wonder, like, you know, if it was just like, you was like, no, I can't do it, or you just didn't even have the energy to even, like, try to, you know what I'm saying? But the entire situation is sad.
Yeah, very much so, man. Like,
I really hate that.
And the burden he still has to live with it to this day.
Facts.
That was just in 99.
That's hard on that. I can only imagine, like, the mental state.
And luckily, his family could vouch for him. David's family could vouch for Rafi. Yeah. Because then, like, they know who you are. They know, as like, that's not
your character.
So they could be character witnesses. And even though he's the victim, like, it's nothing like having, like, now I'm the party that committed the crime, per se. Wow. There's nothing like the victim's family being able to come to your support and be like, no, we know, you know what I'm saying? Y'all did what y'all had to do. Y'all, you know, and then, I don't know, man. That's a bad decision. Honestly, I thought, you know what I'm saying, that because situations have happened like that where whoever is the first one to die, or somebody willingly give up their life and
sacrifice their life. Okay,
I'll be the one who dies so you can survive. Because I was surprised that he buried him. I thought he was, but also they did write the letter and say we would try to preserve the body so
that the family would be able.
But like you said, when I paused and said save it, it's the most devastating part of all of this is the fact that they came and rescued you less than 12 hours later.
That's
less than 12 hours later.
That's what's so sad. Y'all did all of this overnight or whatever, or the day before, and the next day.
And like I said,
and on top of being rescued the next day, y'all were literally 15 to 20 minutes away from your car.
That ain't nothing but right down the road.
The entire time, and it's just like, wow. That's the only thing I'm just so messed up in the head about. I'm just like, what?
15 to 20 minutes just take me to the back.
That's just...
You know what I'm saying? That ain't nothing.
Yeah.
I'm 15 to 20 minutes walking away. That ain't nowhere. That's about 3-4 minutes driving. And
so I will go back and renege on like what I said in the beginning, because I won't really renege because it was stated, but even though people stay out there longer and, you know, it's like, okay, they went over the, you know, the permit or whatever.
3 days still too long.
3 days, it should be definitely changed. If they don't come back, I would probably have since then, but if someone, you know, don't come back like when they're supposed to, you know, like if it's just that day, someone needs to go out there. Like
at least 12 to 24 hours. All right, let's go look for them. 12 to 24. I think we can, because you don't want to panic and just be, because just imagine how many people actually don't come back when they.
I get that, and then you don't want to panic, but
I'm always, 3 days is too
3 days is stretching it. But I'm always the type of person, things can happen just like that. So I feel like even 12 to 24 hours is a long time.
True.
Like so much can happen. So much can happen within an hour.
I agree.
So That's a long time. Come get me right away, cause I may be lost.
And that's what I was saying in the beginning.
Like, and I would tell them before I go hiking, hey, if I don't come back in my time, don't wait. Don't be like, well, maybe they changed their mind. I didn't change my mind.
Yeah.
Cause I don't even really want to be out here.
I'm needing help.
I'm out here, trying to, be open-minded, okay? Like, do not
be vicious.
Yeah.
And I fell for it. And I ain't here for it.
I'm here to support a friend. Like, please come and find us.
Yeah, it's very sad, man. Devastating.
Please, it really is.
Unfortunately, David had to go out the way, and little did he know.
Yep. That rescue was right around the corner. Yeah. Literally.
Yeah, and I'm glad for Rafi, but again, to be honest, that will mess up somebody's mental for the rest of their life. For one, what I went through is mentally draining already.
Right.
2, I had to kill somebody. Yeah. Y'all ain't thinking about it. Like, I had to kill my close friend. That's 2. 3, I had to go to jail. I never pictured myself. I was out here because I went, was it graduating or visiting? Santa Barbara, UC Santa Barbara.
Yeah.
Like, something with the school, so I'm on the right path in life. We're just cross country traveling because we're coming from Boston.
Yeah.
And then, unfortunately, a situation happened like that. So that's 3. And 4, I had to deal with survivor's guilt.
Yeah.
Because I'm the one who survived at the end of the day. So I was like, why me? That's a lot of burden to hold on somebody for a long time.
True. And then I will just say this, like, doing stuff like this, no matter how experienced you are, like, never underestimate, like, the situation. Like, if someone suggests, like, we need to take this, take it. Just take it. Because you just never know what can happen. And I'm always the type of person, be prepared for the unknown. Because you just never know.
Facts,
so,
man.
Yeah.
Facts. Y'all went undersupplied.
Yeah.
Undersupplied. And then...
You
used some of the water to even boil your hot dog.
Because I really feel like if they just had the water, well, if they just had the adequate water equipment, that he suggested, I do feel like they wouldn't have been in such a bind. Yeah, even if you didn't have the food,
and they probably could have came.
You still had the water.
And recognized some stuff.
Yeah. So that's sad.
Yeah, man. Y'all spam us up. Y'all let us know y'all thoughts and opinions about it.
Please do.
A sad story, man, for sure. But as always, y'all know how it go, man. I do go by the name DJ kiddandceemgmt. We are.
Had to go and get it. Ain't no time to kick it. Got a stack of flip for my folks. Dollar. Please tell me you can hear me. Don't turn your back and don't neglect me. Just let me know if you need me. Dollar. Let me watch out for my partners. Keep my money low, get my team strong. Let me run away from my problems.